Well, brand Jesus is a phenomenon, I think, that we see in the American church, where you have a Jesus who serves the basic function of a consumer brand, sort of like BMW or some clothing line might serve to establish your consumer image and who you are. Brand Jesus is when one's Christianity functions in that way, sort of giving one the Christian image, the Christian lifestyle, but not necessarily imparting the Christian heart that I think is essential to the Christian life and discipleship. The book's genesis was really in an examination of Romans. I was at a conference and I heard a presenter sort of make the case for the comparison between Rome then and our America now, as sort of both being the capitals of the known world, the centers of commerce and political power and military power and social ideas and philosophy and all these things. And then he pointed out how strange it would have been for the original hearers of Paul's letter to the Romans to hear this claim that history is upended by the death of a peasant roughly 25 years ago in a backwater province of the empire. I thought, what a strange thing the gospel would have seemed to these people, the Romans, when they first heard it. And I thought, why doesn't the gospel seem strange to us? Why does it seem so normal to us? And so with that as sort of my motivating impulse, I started looking through the text of Romans. And that's where as I began to sort of try and read our society through the biblical lens, what I came up with, sort of as I scraped it away, what I came up with was this idea that consumerism is the dominant idea in the United States right now. From the Christian retail economy, we have this explosion of Christian T-shirts, which I go into in the book. And I don't think per se that I don't want to slam makers of Christian T-shirts. Again, I am assured that their integrity and their desire to serve Christ is genuine, and I respect them as brothers and sisters in Christ. That said, I think that what we see is in the booming Christian retail economy, which was worth $7 billion a couple years ago, and that's $7 billion of pretty low-priced items, so that's a lot of buying that's going on. What's that serving? If people are spending this much money on Christian stuff, are there more Christians? Is there a bigger percentage of Christians in the United States? Well, no, there's not. Actually, the percentage of Christians has actually fallen over the past 5 years. Are we better Christians for it? And well, no. I mean, the evidence is not that we are better Christians. On the one hand, you have books like Ron Sider's The Scandal of the Evangelical Conscience that says, we're living just like the rest of the world. And on the other hand, you have churches not really... I don't see the churches standing up with one unified voice and saying the sorts of radical messages that Jesus said on the Sermon on the Mount, of turning the other cheek, of dispensing with wealth as an acceptable thing for Christians, this sort of thing. So if we're spending this much money on Christian stuff, and it's not having a difference in our discipleship, then that tells me that something in what we're dealing with isn't the right thing. And I try to go into that in the book. Does the way we talk about Jesus in our churches today, and with what I'm alleging as brand Jesus, does that make us look more like Christ? Because that, I would argue, is the central task of discipleship that we see in Romans 8, that God foreordained that those He called would be conformed to the image of His Son as the firstborn in a large family. And so you have this sense that to follow Christ is actually to grow in one's resemblance to Christ. So is the Jesus that we're putting forward in our churches today, is the Jesus of the gospel that we're putting forward in our churches today, is that making people look more like Christ? Is that enabling them as disciples of Christ to resemble Him in all their aspects? And I would argue that a lot of the times in what we see in churches today, the Jesus that we see in churches today is really sort of more of a brand accessory. Maybe it makes you a little bit better of a person, but it doesn't really encompass the radical nature of the gospel that says, you are not going to be conformed to this way of being anymore, and you are instead going to be conformed to the way of the only one who has ever been righteous, who is Jesus Christ.